Hello, this is Kat, aka Kakibot, and today, maybe if you're not new to this channel, you can tell that I am not in my usual room. This is my new office in our new home because we have finally bought our first Scottish home. Exciting! And I thought, now that we have freshly gone through that experience, I would make a video that a lot of you have been asking for. I have made a whole bunch of notes about it. We have sat down yesterday with Simon. We have kind of collected our memories, but we have also, most importantly, collected all the things that have surprised us. And also, let's just get something out of the way. First, this is our first home of our own, so we are kind of new to the process. We have no way of really comparing it to any other experience that was in any way similar to this in our lifetimes. So yeah, this is really just about sharing how it was for us, and hopefully kind of like if we sat together as a bunch of friends and we were telling you about things that we would recommend you kind of look out for and things to not get surprised by. That's the sort of general vibe of this video. There's plenty of people on the YouTubes who have videos that will be so helpful to anyone who's actually looking for like very specific advice and data and numbers, and I will have very little of those and mostly just share the impressions and sort of friendly advice. So yeah, let's get into it. Now, obviously the first thing that you're gonna do when you're looking for a home in Scotland is that you're gonna do some window shopping. I think that it's always good to have a bit of a list of things that are a priority for you in your home. So for us, we moved from a place that had 3 bedrooms and kind of like a little extra nook, so it was quite big for just 2 people, but we both work from home and we rely quite heavily on having like a space of our own. I also kind of, for my own mental health, I do need to have like a little cubby hole to hide. In many of my videos, I have already mentioned a website called Zoopla. There are probably other equivalents of it. I am in no form of cahoots with Zoopla, but I have found all of our rentals and our first home through Zoopla. So I think that at this point I truly can only recommend. The experience has always been good. Not only you get the list view, but you can also draw a map, which I find that's a really cute feature. Even if you do have a specific place in Scotland in mind, maybe that's Edinburgh, or you know, it's the Highlands or whatnot, maybe you do want to do a bit of window shopping in other areas also, because I think that in this part of the process, the biggest surprise might be that the pricing can be quite different. So let's say, for example, the difference between Edinburgh and Glasgow might be as big as for almost half the amount of money you might be getting twice the amount of meters square of property. So this might sway you towards considering moving to a different area of Scotland than you originally thought you would be moving to. Similarly to some other like more rural areas of Scotland, somewhere like East Lothian is usually quite spenny, but somewhere between the 2 cities, you know, West Lothian and that sort of area, it's not as pretty, but you might find your sort of dreamy forever home, even if it's not in the fancy East Lothian, you might find it somewhere else and you might get a much better deal on it. Now the next thing, and I think that this will surprise many people because it was probably like the biggest weird sort of learning experience for us, is how the pricing in, I imagine, most of UK, but definitely in Scotland works. So when you are at a place like Zoopla, or even if you're just, you know, walking on the street and looking into the windows of like realtor agents, you're gonna see all the listings of the houses and you will see kind of a specific price there. And usually, most often it will say offers over. And you know, you would think offers over this price that they give you in the listing. No, that's not how that works. So if you like the place, the listing price is kind of like a, it is not even a minimum. It is actually, the listing price is usually like couple thousand, couple tens of thousands under the actual value of the property. And what you'll have to do, you will have to reach out to the agent and you will have to ask for the home report. And in the home report, you will get the actual sort of valuation of the property, which is what you will have to offer over. So yeah, and when it comes to offering over, with how the housing situation is in Scotland right now, it is very unlikely that you wouldn't be offering over. But obviously, there are types of properties that are on the market for a couple of months, and maybe the price goes down over time. However, you can probably read between the lines if a house or a flat has been on the market for a couple of months and hasn't sold, it's probably not a great one. Either it might be a serious fixer-upper, or it's in a neighborhood where everything is on fire, or it's just a really bad deal. So I feel unless you are brave, unless you really have a lot of self-esteem in the sort of fixing-upping department, I feel that's a bit of a red flag. Anywho, when it comes to offering over in a regular scenario where you're not moving into a little rat slum, the standard is offering between 5 to 20% over the home report price. So that's not the listing price, it's the price that you get from the agent after asking for it, which is horrible. I feel this shouldn't be legal. I find this really frustrating and kind of disingenuous, to be totally honest with you. It's not great. So yeah, if it's a less of an exciting property, 5% is probably the minimum you should offer over, and maybe you'll be really lucky and get it with that. 10% is more of the standard, and 20% is something you might have to offer for something that's absolutely fantastic. And obviously once you're offering 20% over, then you must be loaded and seriously in love with that specific property for one reason or another. That just feels like an interesting way of using your money, but obviously no judgment. If you find a place that is totally perfect for you and you really, really want it, then there is no limit of how much you can offer over. If I'm kind of vaguely giving you some insight on what happened with this house, I think that the listing was 230k. The valuation was 250k, and we did offer 10% over because that was really, after we did the math, that was kind of the most we could offer. And we got it. And I think that it took about 5 days since we put the offer in for the agent to call us. Now, this is another thing that is kind of a pleasant surprise for a change. Over in England and the other nations of United Kingdom, I think it is a lot more common to be gazumped, which, if you're not familiar with the terms used around real estate buying, then gazumping is essentially when someone has already accepted your offer and then they let someone else offer over and basically kick you out of the process and accept the other offer that is higher, which for the seller, that's obviously better. But here in Scotland, it's not illegal, but it's almost unheard of. I think from what I've read, it's mostly to do with just how fast the agents are usually taking the listings off the sites once an offer has been accepted. So that's good. That's one less thing to worry about in the process. Obviously, you should still, it can still happen. From what I know, it can happen, but it is very uncommon. So that takes a little bit of anxiety out of the mix. Yay, I can always do with having a bit less anxiety in my life. But despite this whole sort of sense of it's probably fine, there's probably not gonna be anyone else coming into the mix and stealing this property from me that I offered over on and I really want. There was still kind of a notable lack of a specific moment where we would sit down and open a bottle of champagne and celebrate. The whole process is very kind of muddled with a constant sense of, I'm not sure, like, are we actually buying this? Should we tell our letting agency that we're moving out? One thing that will help you feel a bit more kind of tied into the process is obviously once you start to roll the ball on some of the things that you need to do to actually buy the house. So I think that the first thing I will mention is that you have to kind of get a bunch of people to kind of help you with it. You have to get the team together. You have to get a solicitor. You have to get like a mortgage advisor, but you also I don't think that you legally have to. In our case, our agent or like the realtor also offered to basically be our mortgage advisor. And we shopped around, but in the end, this guy seemed to give us a good deal. And obviously, like, it made the communication a bit easier because now we only had to communicate with 2 parties and not 3 parties, which honestly, the communication in this whole process was a bit of a poop show. It always took ages for us to hear from anyone, and from what I've heard from other people, that's not uncommon. I think especially once you get a solicitor and if you have like a fancy solicitor and you go to their office and you see it's like this whole like wooden library setting, it's very dark academia, very pretty, serious, you will probably be very underdressed for that visit and for like signing the papers with them. You kind of realize like, oh, I paid them a couple of £100, so I'm probably not the biggest priority in the grand scheme of things, but it's all good. It worked out in the end. So even despite us, again, being fed like a little bit of extra anxiety through the lack of communication and the sort of lack of reaction or like long reaction times, it ended up being fine. So like if you're going through the same and you're freaking out, maybe there is not a real reason to do so. So maybe that's a helpful information for you, something reassuring for you who are about to go through the same process. By the way, the solicitor thing is a Scotland-specific requirement. I think in England and Wales and perhaps Northern Ireland, the idea is that it's the realtor who kind of deals with like transferring the money and also dealing with the seller, which would kind of like it also, that feels a bit more streamlined for sure, and I imagine the communication in that sort of situation is faster. However, here in Scotland, you need to have an independent solicitor, and the seller also has an independent solicitor, which in a way I think that it's a bit reassuring because there's always going to be like someone there to be on your side. Our solicitor was pretty good at kind of like going through the survey in the home report with us. I haven't mentioned this, but this is another thing that's specific to Scotland. When you get the home report, a part of it is the survey, which is kind of like, a list of a professional has visited this property and kind of gauged what sort of state it's in. And there's like I think it's like a 1 to 3 or like A to C scale, in which it goes from like completely fine, don't worry about it, to this needs fixing now, and like the middle tier being, this looks like it's gonna need some attention within the next 5 years, but like right now it's fine. And this is something that in Scotland, I'm assuming the seller has to pay the surveyors to do that, to provide you with that information before you sign up for buying the house, which seems fair. While in the other areas of the UK, from what I've heard, you, the buyer, you have to pay someone to go there and like scope the place on your behalf. Obviously, like then you kind of know who it was, and like they're technically paid by you, so they might have a bit more attention to detail, perhaps. Maybe that's better for you in the long run. However, Here you have the solicitor, who is the independent person in the whole process, and they will go through this survey with you, and they will kind of like ask you, they will make sure that you understand what it all means. And then they also go through the contract that you get from the realtor, and often will kind of help make it a bit more understandable, not just in the way of like explaining to you what these things mean, but often also saying like, well, this bit that's here, this doesn't need to be here, because like your property, let's say, doesn't have a balcony, or your property doesn't have a garden, so I'm going to tell them to leave this out. They're essentially trying to like simplify the process and making sure that you're not just being kind of brushed away with some sort of like canned stock contract, that the contract is actually sort of tailored to your needs and the property you're buying. Now, you're gonna be talking to your mortgage advisor / realtor, because in our case, that was the same person, about some of the things that, well, obviously you're gonna talk about a mortgage, but that's not everything you need. There's a couple more things you will need to finish buying your first home in Scotland. However, first, I'm gonna just talk for a little bit about this space that we are now new to, because there's a lot of it. This is a big house, and obviously this is not a fixer-upper, but I think, one thing you can all imagine when you move from a rented place to a place of your own, even if it's not a fixer-upper, if you're a creative, that urge to like make it yours and like creativity inducing is really strong. This room specifically has gone through quite a lot of upgrading. This is a process that can be very intimidating. Suddenly this is all yours, and if you mess it up, you messed up your thing. Which is why it's great that Skillshare is there to help if you need any extra insight from professionals on pretty much anything that's creative. I have found Anna Marku, who is a licensed architect and has a whole bunch of classes on Skillshare on this. Personally, I have been enjoying her home interior design for more joy. It just has so much great insight on how to make all of this space just like be filled with inspiration, and I love it, and I have been working really hard on my room, and I can't wait to show you more of it. But you'd be surprised just how many topics Skillshare covers. Maybe you're looking for an experienced professional to help you organize your small business finances, or setting up a little photography studio in your home. You will find exactly what you need among the thousands of classes available on Skillshare. And as always, the first 500 of you who use the link in my description box will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare with access to all of its amazing classes. So why not check it out today? Thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. Okay, so now to the things that you will need to deal with regarding money. Yeah, obviously the mortgage. That's something that, again, there are people on YouTube who will be much better trained to give you actual advice on this. There are many people on YouTube who are kind of in the whole like financial sphere. I think that it's quite smart to kind of look into this before you make the final leap. I think you might be surprised just how much you're allowed to borrow. You might be surprised just how little you can afford in terms of like the percentage that you're actually owning. So for us personally, I think this was, again, kind of like a pleasant surprise in the process. I always thought that I would only feel comfortable if I own 15% of a property. And I did, the savings I had always made me feel like, yeah, I do have 15% for like most things that I like. However, if you remember when I mentioned that like the pricing on the listings is usually off by good like 50 grand, often more, you can imagine how that will kind of make you say goodbye to that sort of image of like being very responsible, owning 15%. It is possible to get a mortgage on 10%. That's actually what we have. I'm not super chuffed with it. I really wish we could have 15%. We originally were after, I think 12 or 13%, but essentially our mortgage advisor said, you're gonna get the same deal on 10% as you will on the 12%, and you will kind of keep some of your funds liquid, or you will keep more of your funds liquid. And for that, you know, especially because we did have to deal with all the extra bits that I'm going to mention in a bit, it sounded like a very reasonable option. I have to say, especially in hindsight, now that we've been here for like 2 months, like month and a half and a bit, I'm really glad that we didn't like push for a higher percentage, because again, we weren't able to quite reach the 15%, and if we reached for the 13, then we would just like wipe out all of our savings. And it was really good to have some extra money to just, you know, buy furniture, because obviously when you're buying house, the furniture from your old house might simply not fit your new house. And if you have very specific visual sort of idea about what you want to do, that is a problem. Anyway, of course, you know, there's usually the sort of fixed rate mortgage, and there's, you know, you can often pick the fixed rate for, I think there's like 5 years or 3 years. We went for the 5 years. I think I kind of like the idea of being able to predict how much you're going to pay every month. And of course, at the end of the stretch of like the 5 years, you might get totally messed up. Sorry, I'm trying to be polite with my words here. On top of your mortgage payments, you will also have to be paying for a couple of things that are a legal requirement, which is things like life insurance and house insurance, and also a will. That was a bit surprising to me. I wasn't expecting them to ask for my will. And another thing that was a surprise in this part of the process was that it genuinely felt quite intrusive to have to talk to the mortgage advisor and basically give him all the info about like where all my money is going. And I mean, where all my money comes from is fine. I'm kind of used to, like, I have many sort of little incomes, so I'm used to talking to my accountant just about like, well, this is from Patreon, and this is from YouTube, and this is from selling little pins, and this is from selling stickers at markets. So I'm used to that, even though like people tend to be kind of confused, and they don't seem to see it as like the most stable sort of income, but like it still worked out. Anyway, the unpleasant part was having to kind of like go through all of your like outgoings, all of your expenses, because I don't know, like it's just very personal. Like I think that maybe obviously like between me and Simon, like we would probably be willing to do that. But when there's like a third person in there who you don't know, it's just weird. Like, how do you explain almost everything? Okay, there wasn't like that much digging. Like he said that he needed to know this mostly to kind of be able to tell us like, oh, you're like paying too much for this, or like maybe there's an overlap in these two services. Maybe you could cancel one of them. Which is fair, but we didn't get any advice of that sort from him, so it just felt weirdly intrusive, and I don't want to do that again. Did not enjoy. Obviously, as a foreigner, I also had to prove my settled status. Now, a lot of you who are watching this, I imagine, are not UK nationals. Some of you might have a settled status, but if you moved here after Brexit, then you don't have that anymore. Then you have to have like special visa. I unfortunately don't really have the bandwidth to do like research on how this works for people on a visa, but I do see a lot of people specifically from USA coming specifically to Edinburgh and buying property there. So clearly it must be possible. But yeah, that's not what this video is about. And that wasn't a part of our experience. For me, I just have to say, as someone with settled status, I have been treated as any other UK national throughout the whole process, and it was extremely easy. I think that like the only thing I had to do was to prove my settled status, and that was it. If you are employed, it's going to be pretty easy. I think that you basically just have to prove your employment, give them all the info about your employer. I am not sure if they actually like have to contact your employer. There's probably some sort of background check happening, but in general, that is like the easier way of doing it. If you're self-employed, then that's harder, and I was talking to a self-employed friend about 2 years ago, and he pointed an interesting thing out to me, which is that when you're self-employed, it can be really tempting to like write off a lot of things of your taxes, because like that's kind of the magic of being self-employed, that you get to sort of, you know, a lot of the things that you buy for your business, especially if it's a creative business, are quite fun, and you get to save, you know, 20 or 40% simply because you wrote them off your taxes. But that obviously on paper makes you look like you're making almost nothing, which is not great, especially when you're asking for a loan. So yeah, I had a much harder time, especially because my taxes were not fully finalized at that point. So I would just give you this piece of advice. If you're looking into getting a mortgage, especially like a chunky one, if you're a first-time buyer, and you're self-employed, and I think that at this point a lot of people are self-employed, just make sure that like your taxes, your like the latest tax year is fully finalized, and you do have like a nice overview to give to the mortgage advisor. That will make your life a lot easier. Now, towards the end of the process, we got this email from our solicitor, which was basically the stuff that we had to pay, including, I think that this included the fees for the solicitor and a lot of like the other bits that are a part of kind of, you know, the fees and taxes that you have to pay to the government. In the wider UK, there's a thing called the stamp duty, but in Scotland, it's actually called something else. It's called land and buildings transaction tax. It's usually lower for first-time buyers, but it depends on how expensive the property is. So yeah, we did have to pay a bunch of that, but I think it was a bit less than we would if this was our second home. So that's okay, but you know, still, this is the sort of thing that like you need to keep in mind when you're budgeting, because like if you don't have much wiggle room, which like we had like a good chunk of savings, but we did not have much wiggle room, because if you know, I used to have a good job, and now I'm just a creative freelancer doing artsy things and making videos about Scotland, and the wiggle room is just not there anymore. By the way, I do have a Patreon page if you find this video useful, and if you find any of the other videos useful, and if you want to have access to more videos, then do head on over. Sorry, my notes are slipping. Very professional. Do head on over to my Patreon. This is the address. And yeah, I do make a monthly bonus video there. And if you're on a high enough tier, you also get free stuff every 3 months. I'll send it to you through snail mail. That's very old school, very classy. Okay, well, anyway, that's one way of you being able to help me through this this big financial decisions I've just made, maybe stupidly. Speaking of financial decisions and savings, now when you're a first-time buyer, or if you're a prospective first-time buyer in the UK, I think that you probably already have a financial product that's called Lifetime ISA. This is a tax-free way of saving money, and the Lifetime ISA is specifically made for people with, you know, who have the intention to buy their own first property. The idea is that every financial year you get to get a 25% bonus from the government, which is quite generous, and I believe that as sort of banking products go, that is the most generous of them. There is a cap on it, which is the most you can put in, or the most you can get back in this bonus is £1,000. So that kind of, I quite like that, because it creates this like ideal goal that every year you put in 4 grand and you get 1 grand extra, which you can imagine that over a couple of years, maybe you put in 20 grand and you got 5 grand back. That's quite a lot of money. And yeah, so that's something that we both had, and we did have, you know, solid amount of money in there. However, one thing that was a surprise, and also something that I want to warn you about in the process with our solicitor and the mortgage advisor, there was basically at no point anyone has told us this is something you guys have to deal with, because the communication between all of these like sides of the process was, I would say, lacking and kind of slow, as I already mentioned, I believe. And so it was kind of easy to get lulled into this idea of like, oh, clearly they're dealing with that, because like we gave them all our info. They know our like legal names. I'm pretty sure we gave them our like account details about the lifetime ISA. And yet, at one point they were like, oh, have you taken out the money yet? Because we're kind of like running low on time now. And we're like, we thought you would do that. So yeah, and this step of the process can take up to a month. Now, this is something like it seems to be one of those things that like there's a bit of wiggle room. Essentially, if you just like call them up and say, I'm taking this money out, please, then like if you just do that, they will give you maybe up to a month of waiting time. However, as we were quite panicked, we were bothering them quite intensely about this, and I think that they did it kind of on time. Now, the money did not kind of empty itself into our account. It went straight to the solicitor, and then the solicitor kind of like deals with sort of resending the money to like the government for the taxes, and the other sort of solicitor for the seller. But yeah, that was that was a bit anxiety inducing, not gonna lie, a bit panicky, but it did work out in the end. Similarly, one thing, now that I'm moving to the very end of the whole process, which is actually coming to your new place and first coming to the agency and picking up your keys, which, you know, again, that feels like that should be a kind of a celebrated special moment. Like you should be able to go there and pick up the keys and feel great about yourself for finally doing this. Yeah, that's not what happened. We went to the agency and they basically said, we have the keys here, but the solicitor, the seller's solicitor hasn't told us that the money has gone through yet, therefore we cannot legally give you the keys. So we were basically told, after they told us to come at the specific time and day, we were told to just go like, you know, kick a can around the streets and wait for them to call us, that apparently the lawyers usually get this sorted by the noon, but like they have no guarantees. I guess that like with these things they can't legally promise anything, and they truly have not. So yeah, that was an unpleasant surprise, but the pleasant surprise was that after we went to get a single coffee, they called us and it was ready in like 3 minutes. And it was ready like an hour later. So then we picked up the keys, and another anxiety I had was about like, what can I expect the flat to actually look like? Because obviously at that point, the last time we saw it was about 2 months ago. And I mean, maybe I was looking at it through like rose-tinted glasses. Also, like the previous owners and occupants had 2 months to ruin the place. Like I kept making this joke that like maybe someone just like pooped on the floor and, you know, let us have fun with that. Thankfully, that has not happened. In fact, the previous owners have left a bottle of Prosecco here, and they even did like a bit of painting on the main door. That was a pleasant surprise, although I did not know about it, and I managed to like rub onto the fresh paint with my yellow backpack, ruining my backpack, but that's just bad luck. And just a bummer, because they clearly tried to do something nice, so that's not on them. But anywho, I don't know if this is the standard. If you've already bought your first home, I would love to know in the comment section if this is something that happens when that like the seller like gives you a little gift. I would really love to know about that. Let me know. With our old flat, in our contract, we basically had to give them 1 month notice. That's what we did. I think that we kind of did it a bit late, and also your contract might ask for longer or shorter, but our contract was for 1 month. We did that. We had a bit of overlap, I think about 2 weeks, which was perfect-ish, because like the first week we were moving between, we only moved our furniture here on like day 5 of the overlap. So like the first 4 days we were doing a bunch of painting. We didn't really finish the painting, so we were then painting with the furniture here anyway. But it was something. And then we used the second week of the overlap to clean the old house and just kind of finish the move, because obviously, yeah, it just cannot be done in one go. Most of our move was done by a moving company. This is the name. It cost £1,000, and it was multiple men for the whole day between two cities, which I think is it's a good deal. Like, you know, paying £1,000 for, you know, men hauling your shit up and down like several flights of stairs on a hot day. I think, again, it's a good value. Okay, that gets me to the end of this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It was kind of fun to sit down with Simon and really think about the process and what surprised us about it. I would love for you to share any of your own surprises if you've already bought a house. And if there are any other questions you might have about the process that you think I could have some insight on, don't worry. Just like leave a question in the comment section and I'm gonna do my best to get back to you, or I will force Simon to do it if he remembers more things than me, which doesn't happen often, but sometimes it might. You can also find my face over on Instagram, KakiBot for illustrations, KakiBlog for photos and life in Scotland. And you can also find a map of 100 plus cool things to do and visit and see and eat in Edinburgh over on MAPPR. You can give me a little tip to unlock all of those 100 plus places, and it's another nice way of supporting me and getting a bit of extra value out of knowing about my existence. So yeah, that will be very much appreciated, because I am skint, as you can imagine. That's probably what happens to everyone after they've moved houses. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me for this little talky video in my new exciting office. Hope you like it. Do you like it? Let me know. And yeah, I shall see you soon. And by that point, it's probably going to be a bit cleaner and nicer. And there will be more pictures on the walls. I promise. Okay, see ya.